Coming to you live from the shadow of the big house, it's IT4U. Tips and tricks on ITS tools, products, services, and more with your host, Gene Mackey. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to IT4U. I'm your host, Gene Mackey. These are live webinars brought to you by Information and Technology Services. Let's see if I can get happening here. If you're having an audio or video problem during the live webinar, just let us know in the chat pod. If it's not on our end, we can offer a little troubleshooting. If you're watching the YouTube captioned recording of this, look in the description. You'll see a link to a Google Doc with some resources, which I will also send. If you need an accessibility accommodation to participate in a live episode, just give us a little heads up. And today, we've got David Mulder talking about the eResearch Proposal Management Data Set. So let me get his slides happening here. And there we go. Welcome, David.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm David Mulder. I'm the training manager for the Office of Research and Sponsored Projects, otherwise known as ORSP, and also Finance Sponsored Programs. I am being joined off camera today by two of our resident data experts. Vasu Ramani is over this way from me. Vasu is a senior business analyst with ITS on the Research Administration Systems team that brings you systems like eResearch. And also joining us in the room is Laura Dickey, who is the data and reporting manager for ORSP. And both Vasu and Laura have been extensively involved in the data side of the implementation of the new award management functionality and are about as expert as you can get on the eResearch proposal management data set. So they will certainly be here to chime in if any questions come up that I am unable to answer. So good resources to have on hand. So today we have an agenda that we wanted to bring to all of you. We've had requests from a lot of folks out in the research administration community to do sort of an introduction to the data warehouse and to business objects in general. A lot of folks have started to kind of dabble in it a bit, but it can be sort of daunting. And so we wanted to just kind of dip our toes into it today for folks who may not be familiar with it and may need a little hand-holding, as it were, to get started. And then we can certainly look in the future to having more in-depth sessions as well. So today we're going to be talking just briefly about what the data warehouse is, why you would want to use it, what kinds of questions you can answer with it, briefly about what business objects is as a tool. We'll talk a little bit about the RS02 proposal management data dictionary, talk a little bit about the other research data sets that are out there. Well, there is only one, but also we'll be looking specifically at U of M maintained reports. We'll look a little bit at creating ad hoc reports, not a lot. We'll be looking mostly at predefined reports instead, and then also how you go about modifying predefined reports. And I want to give a shout out to Jean. I used a previous slide set of hers from another IT4U presentation and borrowed liberally.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks, Jean. Okay, so what is the U of M Data Warehouse? In a nutshell, the U of M Data Warehouse is a repository for data that we have all of these transactional systems across campus, systems like the eResearch systems, the HRMS, Human Resources system, FinProd, the financial management system in M Pathways, all of these various enterprise systems that are used to capture data from users across campus. And the data warehouse is a read-only repository of various pieces of that data at a predefined time, usually nightly at this point. There's a process that happens called extract, transform, and load, or ETL, that sort of sucks data out of all of those transactional systems and dumps it into the data warehouse where it can be used in a read-only way for both predefined reports and also generating ad hoc reports or on-the-fly reports. As I mentioned, each data set has a specific refresh schedule. There's a link there so you can see the refresh schedule. Like I said, mostly at this point, data sets are refreshed daily, but there are some exceptions, so it's always good to check. And for the eResearch data sets, that is true that they are refreshed nightly. So once the data gets extracted from the online transaction processing or the production systems and goes through this ETL process and is dumped into the warehouse, it gets converted into what are called data sets. And all of the data then is housed in these various data sets that we have based on the topic or the subject area. So we have a student data set that uses primarily data from the MPathway student administration system. We have an HR and benefits data set using primarily data from the HRMS system in MPathways, et cetera. So this graphic is just showing most of the data sets that are available out there to report from. And the arrows, you may have noticed, show that there are relationships across these various data sets. So they're not isolated, and we'll look into that a little bit more in just a little bit. There are actually ways in which data from one data set can show up in another data set. So why would you want to use the data warehouse? Well, because you can interrogate the data and answer questions that you may have. So for things on the research administration side of the world, you might want to answer questions like how many pending proposals are in the pipeline to be submitted by my department, or how many active awards does my department currently have underway and what kinds? Are they federal, non-federal, et cetera? And then you can also use it to answer compliance-related questions like how many pending proposals does my school or college currently have underway that are using human subjects? And obviously you could go about getting at answers to those questions using the data from the eResearch proposal management system, the live system, but it would take forever. And so by using the data warehouse, we can answer those questions much more quickly. So what is a query then? Well, a query is really just a request for data. You're sending out a request to the data set and pulling back data to hopefully answer your question. And Business Objects is the tool that ITS supports that we use to run those queries against the data. Technically, you can use any what's called an SQL-based tool. SQL stands for Structured Query Language. You can use any SQL-based querying tool to report against the data, but like I said, Business Objects is the preferred and ITS supported tool. And it's also a very robust tool, as we'll see in a minute. All right, so this is a screenshot of what your basic query panel looks like in Business Objects. And I wanted to show this just because if you are new to Business Objects, it can be intimidating, but it's actually pretty simple if you break it down into the three most basic things that are showed on this particular screenshot. You've got three different areas of the screen, and over on the left-hand side where the red bracket is, I'm not sure if you can read that, if it says these are all of the objects you have to choose from. So basically, those are all of the data elements that are available to either show up in your report or to use as filters. So each one of those little blue diamonds is a data element. It's a data element that's been extracted from the eRPM system. You can use those then in the upper portion of your screen where it says results objects. The easiest way to think about it is anything that you drag into that results area is what's going to show up in your report. That's not 100% true because you could use data in your results but not actually have it appear in your report. But for the most part, easiest way to think about it is if you drag it into the results, it's going to show up in your report. And then the bottom area of this screen where it says query filters, those are where you're going to drag objects that you want to filter on or use as criteria in your report. So how are you going to limit the data that you're bringing back? So hopefully that makes sense so far. Are there any questions that I can answer up to this point? Feel free to use your chat pod and we will answer any questions that you might have. Okay, before we jump into more on using the actual Business Objects tool, I do want to just mention a couple of resources that are available that are very handy. One is the data dictionary. All of the data sets that are used in the data warehouse have a data dictionary available. And the eResearch proposal management data set is no exception. So I'm going to jump out of my slides here and just go over to the data dictionary, which I have already up. So this is the Research Proposal Management Data Dictionary. There will be a link to this in the resources document that gets posted afterwards. But the main thing I want to point out is that the data dictionary is divided into 3 sections that all serve a different purpose. And the first, and what I think is probably the most useful, are the table diagrams. So if we scroll down past this introductory information, you'll see the beginning of the table diagrams. And what you see here, where it says proposal management and then RSR_proposal, translates into the first folder of objects that you're going to see in the business objects tool. So the way that the data diagrams are set up in the data dictionary, for the most part, translates into how you're going to see them structured in the business objects tool. And the data dictionary then becomes a really fast and easy way to find any particular element that you might be looking for. For example, if I want to know, I think there's an element out there related to the clinical trial support unit, or CTSU. Well, look at that. I already have it in my find field. If I type CTSU in there and then hit next, you can see here I have a PAF CTSU detail table available. CTSU ID, I'm just going to click next because this is what I really wanted to show you, is that the next section of the data dictionary actually shows the table names that are available and where they're coming from.
And you have a question.
Yeah.
What access is needed to access business objects? How do you get access to it?
That's a great question. So there are a couple of components to the access that you'll need that are both handled through the ORS, the Online Access Request System. You need to request access to the business objects tool itself. And there are, Jean, correct me if I'm wrong, there are still 2 levels of access. There's the view only access or is everyone has WebE now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you need to request access to the actual business objects tool, but then you also need to separately request access to the specific data sets that you want to access in business objects.
And we'll put a link to the online access request system in the resources.
Great. Thank you. All right, so we can see then in the data dictionary that we have a path_CTSU_detail table available. And in the logical table name column, it says proposal approval from clinical trial support unit detail. Shows me where it's coming from, which is the eRPM data set. But then in particular, just going to keep clicking next here. You can see that there are a number of CTSU related fields available. For example, CTSU_ID, which is the specific clinical trial support unit identifier. And it shows me the actual table location where that data element is available, and also gives me a definition. This is a system assigned number used to uniquely identify the clinical trial support unit, CTSU, on a clinical trial project. If I scroll over a little bit more, it gives me examples of the valid values. So if you are unsure where to find a particular data element or whether a data element exists, the data dictionary can be a really good resource, and Control F is your friend. All right, I'm going to jump back into my slides. The other resource that I wanted to mention that can be very helpful is excuse me, this eRPM states status values document, which I also have open over here in Adobe. So this is a document that I think Laura and Vasu put together, and it's very handy because one of the things that can be sort of time consuming when you're doing reports in eRPM, as you may be aware, the states that are associated with paths or awards are numerous. So for example, a path could be in a state of CTRF preparation, proposal preparation, expedited submission, project team request action. There are, I don't even know how many dozens, if not hundreds of states at this point. So if you're constructing a query and you want to limit that query based on the states that a proposal are in, if you're going to individually choose all those states, A, it's going to be time consuming, and B, you run the risk of accidentally leaving out some states that you're interested in. So what folks like Vasu and Laura have done is to instead introduce this value called the status code in this sort of middle column here. And the status code represents a grouping of similar states. So for example, if we wanted to create a query on all of the things, all of the paths for my department that have been submitted to the sponsor. Well, if I were going to do that individually by state, it would mean having to choose things that are in post-submission ORSP making changes, post-submission PR review, you get the idea. Instead, there is this status code of SP or submitted to sponsor. So when I'm creating a query, I can instead limit on that status code of SP and forget about using all those individual states. So this document can be very handy. States to status mapping gives you an idea of which status codes you want to be using potentially in your queries instead of individual state names. Any questions on that? All right. Okay, so let's jump into the actual data that's contained in the RS02 dataset. And by the way, RS02 is just the name that ITS has given the research, the eRPM dataset. There's also an RS01 dataset, which is from the eResearch regulatory management system. When ITS is creating these datasets in business objects requires that they have an abbreviated name, a code name, and RS stands for research. 01, excuse me, 01, the regulatory management dataset, was the first one that was created. So that was RS01. The eResearch proposal management dataset was created second. It's RS02. There's nothing more magical to the name than that. All right, so when you go into the RS02 dataset in business objects, remember this is that left-hand side of your screen. The very top folder you're going to see is the RSR or research proposal folder. And this is probably where you're going to end up getting most of your data from, especially when you're new to doing reports in business objects. This is where you're going to get sort of the most significant data related to proposals, things like the DRDA number, which is what it's called in business objects. DRDA number translates to the path ID, or if it's a legacy proposal, it will be the legacy ID. But for those of you who don't know, DRDA is the former name of ORSP. It stands for Division of Research, Development, and Administration. And at the time the data warehouse was implemented, it was still DRDA and it stuck. So if you're looking for your path ID, it's in DRDA number. This is where you're also going to find basic attributes related to your proposal, like the title, its current state or its current status, which we just talked about, its administrative home department, direct and prime sponsor, etc. I do want to point out, as you may be aware, when you're entering a direct and prime sponsor in your path, they do get hand entered, free text entered in the proposal document, the path. And then after it gets routed to ORSP staff actually behind the scenes go in and enter the official sponsor code for both the direct and the prime sponsor. In the data warehouse, you will only find those official direct and prime sponsor data. There's none of the hand-entered path data in the warehouse. So if you're just starting out with the RS02 data set and just starting out with business objects, chances are you're going to get most of your data and a lot of it from this very first folder. The next folder over on that left-hand side of the screen is the proposal section research activity folder. And essentially this folder translates to what we think of as section 5 in the path, or the research activity section. This is where you're going to find data related to all of your various compliance factors like human subjects, animal subjects, IBC, Institutional Biosafety Committee, conflict of interest, and radiation, which if you're not aware, radiation is managed by the Radiation Policy Committee, or RPC, and so you'll see RPC as the abbreviation in the data warehouse. If you really wanted to drill down into the details of human subjects data, you can actually get all the way into data here that's coming over from that RS01 data set, but there's also plenty of other data to be had from the RS02 data set. Okay, next folder down is the award folder. And this is the biggest change, recent change to the RS02 data set. This is going to contain data that's related to the award management functionality that went live back in August of this year. This is where you're going to find all of the most salient attributes related to your award, including the ID, the project dates, the title, the contact PI name, the direct and prime sponsors again, the award project totals in terms of money, also the proposed project totals, the F&A rate, or facilities and administrative rate, which you'll see in the data set as IDC, or indirect cost, and also the prime sponsor award reference number, as well as a lot of other data. Okay, as we move down the list here then, the next folder is the proposal management budget. Personally, I rarely use this folder. It contains proposed budget data only. There is no award data available, including initial periods and total periods. It does have appointment, department, and effort, and the real value of this folder is that it allows for analysis to be done at an individual path level, rather than aggregated at the award level. So if that's not something that you're interested in doing, this folder probably isn't for you. Jean.
Question, I don't see these folders in my RS02 proposal management. Does this mean I need additional access?
So, Basu, any ideas?
I don't know yet. This is the first for me too. Jean, have you seen this before where it's empty?
I don't know. This is from Molly.
Make sure you do have the plus sign all the way over on the left-hand side clicked to expand the folders.
We might have to take that offline.
Yes.
All right.
I will work with Molly, and we will make sure that she has the right access to get access to these data.
Thanks. Okay, then I'm going to keep moving down here then. The next folder down is the proposal management depth info folder. And this folder, sort of similar to the last one, has a very distinct purpose in that this is where the department-owned data is contained. There are a series of fields that are available in eRPM called Managed User Data, or MUD, the MUD screens. And those data are maintained by unit reviewers out in the schools and colleges. So if your school or college is not managing that data, maintaining that data in those screens, then chances are you're not going to be interested in this folder as well. So definitely check with your department to find out details on whether A, you are actually collecting that data, and B, if it's something that would be of interest for your reporting purposes. Jean.
Yeah, 3 other people are saying they don't see those folders.
Huh. Jean, can you check to make sure that they're not seeing any of the folders, or whether it's...
They say, I don't see the folders either. I think they're the ones that Molly was referring to. No folders on mine. I also see no folders.
Huh.
Well,
Are they on Internet Explorer with the Java supported? Sometimes when the
yeah, that I don't think
Yeah.
that would be it. Maybe send us a screenshot.
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, if you could send us a screenshot, that would be great. Okay, then the next folder down is the subcontracts folder, and it's abbreviated as PAF sub K. So just to clarify, these are the data in this folder is going to be for subcontracts from eRPM. These are not sub-projects, which are sometimes referred to as sub-accounts. So this is looking specifically at money that's coming in or out of the university. This is not for sub-projects set up within the university. So the sub-K ID in this case is the vendor ID or the supplier ID from FinProd. This is not the sponsor code. So just something to be aware of if you are using the data in this folder. Also, unless subcontracts are something that you're specifically interested in doing reporting on, again, this folder may not be something that you use regularly. Same really goes for the unfunded agreements folder or RSR UFA folder. You may be familiar with UFAs from the eRPM system. This is for agreements that don't have any funding associated with them, things like material transfer agreements, non-disclosure agreements, data use agreements, that sort of thing. So all of the details related to UFAs can be found in this folder. But again, if it's not something that you are specifically interested in reporting on, it's unlikely that you'll use this folder. Okay, and then we get to the standalone folders, which are exactly what they sound like. They are folders that you can't use in combination with any of the other folders, or you will generate what's called a Cartesian product error. For the most part, if you do need to use these tables, you'll use them alone. Although I will point out that the research proposal status folder can be useful because you can see when the data in the data set was last refreshed. So sometimes handy there, but otherwise not terribly useful. And then finally, we get to the legacy proposal folders. So this is essentially archived information, and all of the most relevant data that's in these folders is also available in the award information folder. And all of this data predates the implementation of the award management functionality. So in general, if you are, unless you are specifically looking to report on legacy data, there's not a strong need to go here. For the most part, you can get all of the data that you need out of the award folder instead. All right, we are going to jump then to business objects itself. I just want to point out, in case you don't know, to access business objects, you're going to go to Wolverine Access into the Faculty and Staff tab. And then you're going to click on the U of M Data Warehouse link, and you will be prompted for your unique name and UMich password. And then you will come to a screen that looks something like this, which is my favorites. And yours obviously will look a little bit different depending on what kind of favorites folders you have set up. So we're going to mostly look at predefined query, but I do want to start out actually creating a very simple ad hoc query, just because I want to give folks a live demo of that query panel that we were looking at earlier. So if you're going to create a brand new query, you're going to go up to Applications and select Web Intelligence. And then up at the top of the screen, you're going to click on the little blank document to create a new report. And then you actually have in Business Objects the ability to create queries from a variety of different data sources, but we're going to use a universe.
Looks to me like people are in, they're looking at UM Maintain, they're looking at queries, a list of queries, rather than actually being in the data set. So can you show them?
Sure, yes.
Yes. So actually, let me close out. So if you are, I'm going to log back into Business Objects.
Yeah.
So if you're following along at home, go ahead and open a browser window and go to Wolverine Access. Go to your Faculty and Staff tab. Click on U of M Data Warehouse, Business Objects, and then I'll wait just a minute so folks can log in, and I need coffee. Okay, then from there, you should see something like this. This is my favorites. Depending on how much work you've done in business objects in the past, you may not see any folders over here on the left. You may not see any folders here in the middle either. From here, you're going to go ahead and click on Applications and Web Intelligence, and then the blank document to create a new Web Intelligence report. And then you're going to select Universe, and you can either select Universe and click OK, or you can just double click on Universe. Okay. And then the dialog box that opens will list all of the various business objects universes that you have access to. I have access to a lot of them. You may have access to none. Well, actually, I think technically you should have at least one if you've got access to the tool. But the one that we're interested here is the RSO2 proposal management dataset. As I mentioned earlier, there is also the RS01 human subjects research dataset. That's where all of the IRB data is from the eResearch regulatory management system. But the one we want today is the RS02 proposal management dataset. So again, you can either double click on that dataset or select it and click OK. Okay. Then you get to your query panel, and this is where you should be able to see on the left-hand side the various folders that we were walking through earlier. So hopefully some of you are now seeing that. Okay, a couple of words of advice if you're new to using business objects, and you'll get used to this because it's probably what you're going to do every time you come in. You are going to resize the window almost right away. And if anyone from the business objects company is listening, please default this window to a larger size. So you can just drag it, but unfortunately it doesn't stick. So you do a lot of resizing. Also, there is this data preview window down here at the bottom. You may have picked up that this window was not here in that screenshot that we were looking at earlier. I usually work with it turned off. It's really a preference thing. Some people find it handy. Some people think it just takes up more real estate. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it off for the time being, just so you can see that what we're looking at now is roughly the same as what we were looking at earlier in that screenshot. I'm going to create a very simple query just because I want to demonstrate how you do that and how you get objects into your result objects and your query filter box as well. So I'm just going to pull in DRDA number into my result objects. You can either click it and drag it, or you can just double click it and it will automatically go into result objects. And I'm going to do, let's do proposal title. So if I just double click it, it shows up in my result objects. And let's add a filter. Let's say I only want things that are in the current state. And for my filters, I have to drag those in. So I drag that in. It's saying proposal current state is in the list, and it says to type a constant. Word of advice: avoid typing a constant whenever possible. It is so easy to get a typo in there, and Business Objects isn't going to recognize it, and you're going to get no results found. Instead, it's far better to click on this drop-down and select values from list. So this is going to give you all of the defined values that you have available to choose from. And we'll say things that are submitted to sponsor. What the heck? Oh, let's do active too. And I could select as many of those as I wanted and either double click them to populate them over here in the right side of the dialog box, or I can use my little arrow buttons. I'm going to get rid of awarded just to show that. Okay, and then I clicked OK. And now you'll see I have proposal current state, in list, submitted to sponsor, and active. And if I click on run query in the upper right hand corner of my query panel, I get a list back of all of my proposals that are out there that are in the states of either what did I say, submitted to sponsor or active. So you may have noticed that a lot of the functionality in Business Objects is similar to Excel. For example, I just double clicked on the right-hand edge of this column and it auto-fit the column width to the longest report or proposal title that I have out there. I also want to just point out a couple of things. I'm going to go ahead and add a column. So if I select my column and if I right-click, I can go to Insert, Column on Right. So it's very similar to Excel in that way. And now from here, if I wanted to pull in, I want to find out actually what specific state these various proposals are in. I'm going to go back to my data provider, which is this icon here, which is a little cylinder representing a database and a pencil, meaning you're going to write on the database, I guess. And we come back to my query panel, which is missized for some reason. Get it going here. All right. You'll notice my data preview window reappeared. Like I said before, it doesn't do any harm. I can just turn it off again if I want. And if I want to see what the actual current state is of each of these, I'm going to add it to my result object. So you'll remember earlier we added it to our filters. I clicked and dragged it over into our filter. Now I'm just going to double click on it to add it up here to my result objects. And now I'm going to rerun my query. Okay, you'll notice after the first time that you run a query, it doesn't automatically add the data back to your report. So now I'm going to drag that current state field over into that column that I added to my report. And you'll see that I can see which of these are submitted to sponsor. Jump all the way to the end here. Well, we got a lot that are submitted to sponsor. And instead, if I wanted to, as we talked about earlier, I can get rid of this current state criteria. So I'm just going to delete this. And instead, I'm going to use that status code that we talked about. I'm going to go to values from list. And I've got a status code specifically for submitted to sponsor. And I'm going to rerun my query. All right, and so you'll see here based on the state, that includes things like negotiation in progress, etc. All right, so that is an ad hoc query. I'm going to go ahead and close out of this because I want to show folks how to open a predefined report. We have over on the left-hand side of the screen here, there's a tab in your favorites for folders. If you click on that, you'll see public folders. And if you maximize that, one of the subfolders you'll see is maintained. And if you click on that and expand it, you'll see predefined reports that are available for a variety of the different data universes that are out there, including research. I'm going to go ahead and select research and RSO2 proposal management. And these are the various predefined reports that are available to you. Up at the top of the list, we have one that we modified specifically for this webinar called IT4U demo. And if all I want to do is view this report, I can just double click on it. And it will automatically open. The first tab of the report is going to be a series of notes and directions, which are very handy. And then the second tab is the report itself. So I've gone to the second tab, and I'm going to go ahead and refresh this using this button sort of in the middle that has the two arrows on it. And you'll notice that we get prompted to enter some data. So the first thing that it's looking for is the role, what type of roles are we interested in? And I'm going to go ahead and select all of the various PI roles. So other non-faculty investigator, UM sponsor, all the way down. I can just use my shift key to select all of those at once, and then use my arrow key to move them all over. And then for unique name, I'm going to go ahead and choose our illustrious Vice President, Jack Hu. And this is another case where it's always better to search for the valid value just so that you know for certain that you're not mistyping it. So if I use the little binoculars, I can search for, make sure that I've got the correctly spelled unique name. And I'll also add Volker Sick, who I happen to know is VSIC. And there are a couple that contain that. I know I want VSIC. And I'm going to click OK. Okay, so then the data that comes back, you'll see up at the top here, we have Jack Hu's awards. And then if I scroll down a little bit, we've got Volker's. So that's the easiest way to open and run a predefined report. But what if I wanted to actually, oh, we've got a question.
I was just going to say, when you're done with that, show them how to get back and then start a brand new, get to the query panel.
Yep. So I was going to do a save as and then show it.
Cool.
Okay. All right. So if I wanted to actually modify this predefined report, though, and not just open it and run it, I'm going to go ahead and close this. Yes, I want to leave. I'm going to go back to our demo report here, but instead of double clicking on it, I'm going to right click on it. No, I'm not. I'm going to go up to, yes, I am. Sorry. I'm going to right click on it and choose.
And you copy it to your My Favorites.
Thank you. And I'm going to copy. And then I'm going to go back to my documents. And I happen to have this folder here called IT4U RSO2 Overview. I'm going to right click again and paste it. All right. So now that it's in my favorites, I can go ahead and right click on it. And now I have the ability to modify it. So now when I modify it, I'm going to go back to my award page. Now I have my query, my edit data provider button available again. So if I click on that, we have our familiar panel here. Minimize that. And the reason that it is very valuable and useful to modify predefined reports is, so now that we're looking at the query panel, we can see in this particular predefined reports all of the different filters that have been added here. And there are a lot of things here that personally I never would have thought of. So a lot of the thinking is done for you ahead of time.
Yeah, 5 minutes.
All right. So there are a couple of very important things that I do want to point out when you are creating reports. I'm going to go ahead and run this. I'm going to choose my faculty roles again, and we'll do Jack Hu.
You have to go to the next.
Oh, thank you. And Volker Sick again. So something very useful that I tend to use a lot is to set data as sections. So on this particular report, it doesn't make a ton of sense because we only ran it for 2 people, Jack Hu and Volker Sick. But if I had a report with a lot of different data that I wanted to organize into sections, if I just click on the, for example, in unique name, I right click and I go to set as section. Now, what it does is pulls out by unique name, Jack Hu, and then if I scroll down, Volker Sick, so I can categorize my data into sections more easily. Also, I'm going to go into a different report. So this is another report I happen to have ahead of time that has some dollar values in it because I wanted to point out. So this report contains proposed direct dollars, indirect dollars, totals, etc. if I go to, for example, the column for proposed total dollars, I go to analysis, functions, and sum. Business objects is going to insert for me, going to do the math, and it's going to show me what the total was of that. And then obviously I can also do things like I could do count. That doesn't really make sense in this case, but I could do average. So I can see for this particular case, the average proposal amount was for 1.6 million, etc. A last couple of tips that are very important. I am going to go back to a ad hoc query. Go to my RSO2 universe. And I'm just going to pull in DRDA number and title. And I'm going to run it. And see, go to page 700. Okay, so you'll notice a lot of my path numbers here have -OR at the end of them. That is because those are actually copies of paths that have been created and put into the data warehouse for reporting purposes. And the OR stands for original version. That snapshot happens at the time that the path gets submitted to the sponsor. Is that correct, Laura? Okay. And so if you're doing any kind of reporting where you want to be counting paths or looking only at the current data of the path, you always want to exclude those original versions from your report. And you're going to do that by going into your query filters and in your DRDA number, you're going to drag it into your filter and you're going to say different from, where are you? Different from pattern. And you're going to type %, which is a wildcard, OR %. And then when you run that, it's excluding all of those original versions from your report. One last tip. As you may be aware, in the eRPM system, you can create either a path, a proposal approval form, or a pre-proposal. When you create a pre-proposal, it starts out with the letters PRE instead of PAF. Those are all included in that same table. So if you are only interested in reporting on paths, which you very likely could be, you want to also eliminate those pre-proposals from your results. You're going to do essentially the same thing and also add a filter for DRDA number, different from pattern, %PRE. And then you're going to run it. And then one last thing that I just remembered, along the same vein, you may have noticed that I've got a lot of ID numbers here that don't have path in them. Those are legacy proposals from before the implementation of eRPM. If you're only interested in including path data, meaning that it came from the eRPM system, you want to also add a criteria for your path. So you're going to do sort of the same thing, but a little different flavor, because this time you're going to say matches pattern % path %. So now when we run it, we only have paths, we don't have any original versions, and we don't have any pre-proposals. All right, we're out of time here. Hopefully you got some new information and insights out of this, and we would be happy to dig deeper because there's always more with business objects.
All right. I used to be the main trainer for business objects. I'm not anymore, but I put together some resources in my link that I stuck them in the chat pod, but we will also send out a list, a Google Doc with a bunch of resources. So we will provide a captioned recording within a week, and thank you very much. I'm going to stop now.